Greetings, everyone. My name is Peter Osgood. I'm the Director of Admission here at Harvey Mudd College, and I'm joined by a small army of colleagues from other undergraduate colleges in Claremont. And we're happy to welcome you to our program this, depending on where you're jumping in from, in your evening or your late afternoon. I hope for some of you, maybe even the morning, who knows. We have a program for you today where we're going to try and go through some things rather quickly. The first is to do a pretty brief orientation about the Claremont system, both the things that we hold in common as well as the things that we what things separate each of the individual colleges. So students might be able to better find a match with one, with two perhaps, but it's pretty rare for a student to be interested in all five at the same time. We're going to spend some time talking about not only what pulls us together, but how our respective sort of personalities come through. But part of the purpose of the program today is also to help students start thinking about the application process and the various parts and components of an application and how those fit in together that we will then use to help determine which students fit best at our institutions in the admission process. And then we'll also cover a bit about how financial aid works, because that's a serious concern for quite a number of people as well. So we've got a packed program, and I'm going to be initially your host, but you're going to hear from quite a few of my colleagues. The first thing I want to do is talk about this Claremont system, and I invite you to think of this as if you had a family member, like not so much a brother or sister, but maybe a cousin who lives right next door. And in this respect, you might go to your cousin's house and celebrate their birthday. They're going to come to your house. But can we agree that the rules are different in your house than your cousin's, and you'll sleep in your own bed in your own house? This is a collection of 5 undergraduate colleges and 2 graduate schools. We're in a lovely location where we can have access to mountains, to the desert, to the beaches, to great food, a lot of culture, in the second biggest city in the country. But you can also see that our proximity to each other is really important. Actually, what separates Harvey Mudd from Pitzer is a large rock and a bush. In other cases, it's a street, but we're collectively very, very accessible to each other. And so the way this plays out is in a lot of neat ways for your life socially. You can eat meals at the other colleges, join clubs at any number of colleges. The athletics is one of the strangest things where you would have your chief rival institution literally across the street from you. There are 2 NCAA Division III athletic programs, not 5 and not 1. We can explain that to those people who are still confused. The learning system is very much tied into the pedagogy of liberal arts education, which focuses on breadth, on depth of understanding with your major, to have a heavy emphasis toward research, to help you with your analytical skills, your communication skills, basically learning how to think and reason. You will find that these 5 undergraduate colleges in this image here all care about I'll put it this way, if a faculty member doesn't have concern for teaching students as their primary activity, for mentoring students, for advising them, I don't think we have much use for them. They're probably not going to get hired by our institutions. So it's a place where you have the full devotion of your faculty, no matter which college is teaching you the course. And so the opportunity is here to be a student at one college. Let's say you're a Pitzer College student, but you can cross-register to take a course at Pomona or Scripps or Harvey Mudd College, Claremont McKenna College for that matter. And the total number of courses is approximately 2,500 to choose from. And they're all offered at identical times across the different campuses. So if you're 1:15 afternoon class, that course must end at 2:30 to give you 15 minutes to scamper to another college for your 2:45 class. But as you can see from this, the text on the right, the classes will universally be small. You'll have access to a very wide range of academic areas. There are also some academic majors that are collectively supported. So in order to complete the major, you may need to take courses at 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 schools. We share some facilities. There's the image on the bottom left is the front face of the massive library system that serves all of our students. We also have some creative spaces, a design space and a maker space that students can share. There are 2 orchestras. There's 1 main theater outlet for it. But the social services, I'd invite you to think of this as concentric rings, because each college would have, as an example, a health and wellness center, but yet there's a Claremont Colleges wide health and wellness center. And then if it's something more severe, we can send students to local hospitals, which are very proximate, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of concern for a high touch living and learning environment. We are a set of residential colleges. You will live on campus almost certainly throughout your career. It's a pretty small proportion, maybe 2 to 5% of our students who do not live on campus. And if you're eager for Greek life, you'll have to be content with a study of the classics or math or physics, because that's where you'll see deltas and epsilons and lambdas and sigmas. So we have we anticipate this next year after in a post-pandemic, hopefully world, we'll be reintroducing study abroad opportunities. Some of those are communicated across the different colleges. There are cultural empowerment centers. There are shared newspapers as well as individual college newspapers. There's a biological field station we share. So there's a lot of things we do together because we agree to work together, and yet each college has its own individual mission, has its own faculty, its own students. You'd live at your home school rather than living on another college's campus. You will find, I hope very soon when we give a brief presentation about each of the colleges, that each college has its own sort of value system, its own, if you will, personality. And so that the key that we'd like to suggest to students looking over our colleges is they pay attention a bit to where their areas of study might fall, but not to be so governed by that they pay a lot more attention to the kind of community that you'd be joining at the respective institutions, because I think those communities are fairly distinct from one place to the other without trying to stereotype anyone. But that makes each college its own place, and yet you can draw from the greater community of colleges right here. So with that, I am going to, we're going to start talking about the colleges individually in founding college order. So we'll start it off with Stanley from Pomona College, and take it away, Stanley.
Thank you, Peter. And I invite any student here to use the Q&A chat feature. If you have any questions, we have folks on the back end who will be happy to answer your questions. And of course, we'll answer them live as well following the presentation. So real quickly about Pomona, I want to just sort of set the stage here as my colleagues talk about their individual institutions. Pomona College is sort of the oldest and founding member of the Claremont Consortium. We were founded in 1887 by a group of individuals from the East Coast, and their sort of purpose was to start a college of the New England type in Southern California. And what that basically means is that they wanted to start a liberal arts college, in the context of California, which at the time and still is, I'd like to think, the land of opportunity, the land of adventure, the land of exploration, right? And so those sort of themes are kind of rooted into our founding mission. Pomona College is sort of your generalist, sort of typical liberal arts college, where our students are in all sort of broad ranges of academic fields. The social sciences are well represented, natural sciences, the physical sciences, the humanities, arts, music. And so our students, when they're coming into our school, they're sort of exposed to our curriculum, which is the breadth and depth sort of curriculum, where students are, taking classes that they're sort of exploring the first 2 years, they're declaring their major their junior year, and then they're really focusing in and doing things like research and internships, more of that experiential learning piece to see how they want to play around and use their their fields into their future successes. And I'll end it off just real quickly with students or what students do when they graduate from Pomona. And I think it sort of goes back to this idea that, Pomona students are very sort of lifelong learners. About 80% of our students within 10 years of graduating from Pomona, they are getting an advanced degree. And so, if that is something that you're interested in, if you are someone who has different sort of fields that you want to find intersections between, Pomona is a good sort of starting point for you. So with that, I'll hand it off to my colleague at Scripps College.
Perfect. Thank you, Stanley. So my name is Kyla Fisher, and I'm an admission counselor at Scripps. I'm also a graduate of Scripps from the class of 2021, and I've been working here ever since. Scripps was founded in 1926, so we were the second Claremont College to be founded. We are the women's college of the Claremont Colleges. We've since expanded our student body to include trans and non-binary students, so there is gender diversity within the Scripps student body, but there has always been and continues to be a very strong emphasis on gender equality within the classroom and in higher education altogether. So in all of our resources, in the institution that we are, in the support that we create, is all intended to support students of marginalized gender identities. We also have a strong emphasis on interdisciplinary learning and discussion-based classrooms. So when students walk into a room, I like to say that they really have 15 professors and not just one, because all of their classmates are equally likely to teach them something that day as their professor is. So there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of support, not a lot of competition. People are really coming together to learn from each other, to teach each other, and grow academically and personally within and outside of the classroom. The only classes that are not open to the entire Claremont College consortium is our core curriculum, which are three courses that students take during their first 3 semesters at Scripps to introduce them to interdisciplinary learning into the Scripps curriculum, and ultimately giving them an opportunity to do a mini senior thesis before they finish their sophomore year. So students are really supported throughout their time at Scripps, both in keeping in mind their gender identities and not including it, but really supporting students throughout their academic journeys. A lot of our students are interested in a number of different subjects. So students accidentally minor in a number of different departments or have multiple majors. I was a dual major when I was at Scripps, so a lot of things happening academically, but I will turn it over to CMC.
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Rochelle Ehrman. I'm Senior Assistant Dean of Admission at CMC. Thank you all for joining us today. Claremont McKenna College was founded 3rd in the consortium. We are the proud middle child of the consortium. And we were founded in 1946 at the end of World War II. All of our founders had attended Pomona College and had really enjoyed their liberal arts experience, but during World War II had found that they were missing some of the leadership and pre-professional development that they were looking for to go into the real world. And so they came back to CMC with the idea of educating students to be responsible future leaders, specifically in economics, government, and the professions. When we think about that today, we really do think about the professions as being a wide range of things. Our students major in all areas. We have students who go into tech, education, nonprofit work, entrepreneurship and business. So we really are preparing students to go out into the world and be the next generation of leaders and change makers. And a lot of that comes from our focus on pre-professional development in the liberal arts. So very similar to what you've been hearing so far, we're very focused on small classes, learning to gain knowledge, but also what we call learning for the sake of doing, being able to take what you're learning in the classroom and apply it to what you're doing outside of class, whether that's extracurricular activities, internships, research. 80% of our students do undergraduate research. We have 11 of our own research institutes on campus, as well as those in our academic departments and the Keck Science Center. And 95% of our students do at least 1 internship, though half of our students do at least 3 internships while they're at CMC. So we have a lot of success in helping students find and procure internships that they're interested in. And then we also help finance that through sponsored internships and experiences program, which allows students to get money from CMC to pursue internships that are unpaid or underpaid that they wouldn't otherwise be able to pursue. So that's a little bit about CMC. Happy to answer more of your questions in the chat, and I'm going to pass it on to Harvey Mudd College.
All right, welcome back. Harvey Mudd is a very interesting school, has a distinct place in higher education in this country and certainly within the Claremont system because we are a STEM-focused institution. All of our majors are math, science, or engineering, but within a liberal arts pedagogy. So the way we approach these disciplines is a bit different from a lot of other places. We're a young college. You can see that on this graphic here, but it's also a very diverse student body. It's about 20, 25% Latinx. It's about 10% international students, about 7-8% African-American students. It's a blended community, and that's important to us because we're producing problem solvers who need to look at problems from different experiences and perspectives. There are 3 main components of the academic experience. Every student will take a set of required courses in a common core curriculum. Will help you choose your major, will help you see connections between disciplines, will broaden your experiences within STEM, but it also and principally sets up a tremendously collaborative learning process. And I will add that the first semester is not graded, it's a pass no credit system. We also insist that students take about 30% of their courses in the humanities, social sciences, and arts. We want students to appreciate these disciplines of their own virtues, but also because we want to produce scientists who can see the social consequences of their work. It's a very tight-knit community. We're held together partly by the core, partly by our community, partly by an honor code, which governs interactions on campus and helps create those close-knit interactions. We require all students to do some sort of research or a capstone experience called clinic to find out more about their programs. So this is a great school for someone who loves math and science, but doesn't want to leave behind interests in other fields. And with that, I'll kick it over to our colleagues at Pitzer.
Hi, everyone. So a little bit about Pitzer. So we are the youngest one of the Claremont Colleges, and we were founded in 1963. In the 1960s, it really was kind of the height of many social and political movements, and that is the environment that Pitzer kind of arose out of. It really was a kind of home for student activists and people who wanted to engage in those social and political movements. Today, we still remain kind of a home for people who want to learn how to exist in our world as activists engaged in social and political action. So we do focus largely on our core values, such as environmental sustainability, intercultural understanding, social responsibility. And I think those are really present in many aspects of student life, whether that be your academics and our social responsibility requirements in our academics, whether that be what students are involved in outside of class, and whether that be what they pursue after they leave Pitzer and go out into the world. So I really think that is what sets Pitzer apart. And I will let us get started on the admission side of this presentation.
Okay, so that's back to me. We've done a really quick overview of the colleges. We want to turn our attention to the process of applying to colleges, and we understand that this has been a challenging set of years as people have had to adjust to different kinds of instruction modes and the ability to connect with other people. This is a graphic that tells you about the things we do in common. If a student is going to apply to one of these schools, actually you might apply to multiple schools, but one college, let's say Pomona College, will not share information about their applicants with Harvey Mudd or Pitzer or any other college in the group. So you'd apply to each college discreetly, and you can see that we all accept the common application, some accept the coalition application, and but we all are trying to select students based on our respective campus communities and culture. So there are going to be member-specific questions built into the applications. We are also, in terms of financial aid, and we'll cover this a little bit later, we will meet 100% of each student's demonstrated need, but the components of and ways for students to apply are a little bit different from college to college. But I want to stress again that each college will have its own selection process. And the reason why one college might accept a student and another might not is precisely because of this question of fit. So I think that this graphic is something that you might want to come back to, and but you will also find this information on our respective websites if you want to learn a bit more about the application process. But we want to move quickly into the process of how to go about this. And honestly, this starts with you. While it's very common and understandable for students to start thinking, well, which colleges have my major and which colleges are located in a great place, it's a far better process to do what I call an inside out process. And what I mean by that is, particularly in this last year, as you reflect on it, as you grow into your senior year, assuming that's where you are in your progression, that you pay attention to how you like to learn, not just what you like to learn, who you like to learn with and from, how the community shapes and the kind of opportunities might shape who you will grow into rather than who you are right now. Because you've been in a particular bubble to figure out, you know, in your community and your schools, and you'll break away from that when you go to college. Whether it's a really large institution or a smaller institution, it will be a different group of people than you're used to associating. So I recommend that you take a bit of a values-based approach and start looking for colleges that are more like who you are as a person. And I'm going to drop into the chat here for everyone a link to the College Board's Big Future site, which does a very good, I have to do this to everybody, hang on. It does a very good job of giving you information based on your values of some colleges that might match up to yours. So I recommend that you try to build your college list based on these features of who you are now and who you want to grow into, rather than being focused on what college is going to offer my major and what college is going to be a place that I'm familiar with. Once you've got a big pool of colleges, if you can visit them, do. If you can find similar types of schools, liberal arts colleges, comprehensive universities, so on and so forth, and maybe you can extract information from one visit that is relevant to your experience at another similar or type of school. Another good way to connect, honestly, is through social media, Discord channels, Instagrams. Some schools offer TikToks, but you'll be able to communicate with students from that school and talk about their ups and downs and what their experiences really are. That'll give you maybe a little better sense of what will serve you best in the long run. I want to make one other quick point. There are 4 choices to be made in this college match business, and you control 3 of them. The first is you determine which colleges you'll apply to, and that's why you're being sent all this crap materials from all these different colleges right now, because we're uncertain who's going to be in our applicant pools. Once a student applies, of course, the admission office gets to determine which students are going to be admitted, but then you'll hold us out to dry for a good long time as you choose which of the colleges that admitted you that you're going to attend. And then the 4th choice is entirely your own, and that is what you do with the opportunities your school presents to you. So I urge you to think of this as a point of your control more than ours. And I'd urge you to think of this as finding yourself first and then building out from that and finding colleges. And so with that, we're going to move on to various other activities, and you will hear from other presenters.
Thank you. So yeah, extracurriculars are definitely a part of the application where you get to share what you do with your time outside of school. And this is important because, you know, we as admissions officers, not just at the Claremont colleges, but at other colleges, can look at your transcript and get an idea of what you are like as a student. But we don't just want to know who you are as a student, we want to know who you are as a person. And that's really important to us, especially based on what Peter was just saying about like your values and ours. And extracurricular activities are just one way that we do this. So extracurricular activities are anything that you are involved in. So that can be an activity, it can be a club, it can be a job, internship, volunteering, anything that you are doing outside of your time at school. And I know that it can be easy to only think of your extracurriculars as, well, I'm on the soccer team, I'm in the recycling club, and you know, that's it. Those are the only activities I do. And I really want to encourage all of you to start making notes of what you do with your time. Maybe you go home and you take care of siblings. Absolutely put that on your application. We want to know that, you know, that's how you're spending your time outside of school, that that's an obligation you have. Or maybe, you know, every couple of weeks you go and you help at a daycare, or maybe you have family responsibilities like your grocery shopping, you have a part-time job. All of those things are extracurricular activities. And so those are really important to just start taking note of because we want to know about them. And then going off of that, COVID, while, you know, it is a different climate than it was in 2020, we very much know that just because, you know, it's been a couple of years does not mean that its impact is over. Some things aren't available to you and some things, you know, were changed because of it. So most of our applications have areas where you can put things like that, and colleges are very forgiving in what you have been able to be involved in. So again, really urging you to include those responsibilities you have other than traditionally organized clubs and activities. Lastly, I just want to talk about what your extracurricular activities can tell us. So, you know, what you do, why you do it, and, you know, how. So we're going to go on to the next slide, but yeah.
All right. So thinking a little bit more about showing, you know, your personality and sharing that with us in the process. Interviews are a really good way to do that. So what is an interview? It is typically about a 30-minute conversation with someone representing the admission office. And the purpose of the interview is for us to learn more about you. That can be your academics, your extracurricular activities, your passions, your interests, your personality, like just learning a little bit about who you are as a person to add that into your application. It's also an opportunity for you to ask us questions or your interviewer questions to learn more about the college, the consortium, and any other questions that you might have in the process. Should you do an interview? So that will depend widely on what college you're applying to and what their policies are. Some schools like CMC, they are highly recommended. They are evaluative, they are an important part of our application process. But some schools only offer informational interviews, which we'll get to in just a second. Some don't offer interviews, some don't really use it in their process. So you should definitely check every college's website when you're applying to a school to see what they say. We are generally very honest, at least on our website, we tell you very honestly, like, highly recommended. So you will need to look at each school's website as you're doing your application and thinking about this process. Next slide, thank you. So who does interviews? Again, this depends a little bit on the school and the time of year. A lot of schools use current students, seniors generally who do interviews. It's a really great way to connect with a current student to get more information about it, about the school, about their experience, but some will also use admission officers and alumni interviewers. It does not matter who does your interview, they are weighed the same. The difference comes in between evaluative and informational in terms of more of how we use the application, the interview in your application. Evaluative interviews get a full write-up in which the interviewer comments on your answers, your you know, what you've talked about, adds in information, talks about, you know, whether or not they might think you're a good fit for the school. It is not the like end all be all of your application. If someone says something in your interview, that's not going to like cause us to deny or accept you. It is not the game changer, but it is another element that we take into consideration when making that decision. Informational interviews are designed more to be an opportunity for you to learn more about the school than they are for the interviewer to evaluate your fit or your ability to communicate in that interview. So they might, still do a write-up and give more information about you, but they're generally not providing as much information about your performance in the interview and whether or not they think you would be a good fit for the school. When to do an interview, my colleagues can tell you, I say this all the time, do it over the summer. You're going to go back to school in August or September, and your guidance counselor is going to say to you, have you done your interviews? You should sign up for an interview. And then every other high school student in the country, in the world, is also going to be trying to do that because they went back to school and their guidance counselor was like, hey, have you done your interview yet? So a lot of schools offer them over the summer. We've been doing them since the end of May. Like, sign up for them now. Do it while you're thinking about it. Do it while you have the free time. Like, you're really, relaxed over the summer, thinking about it. Like, really take advantage of doing it over the summer. And I should clarify that this is the summer before your senior year. So if you're going to be a junior in the fall, this does not apply to you. I really recommend doing it then. If you don't have time, if you need to do it later, still really start thinking about it early. Like, the earlier you sign up, the better chance you have of getting a time slot that works for you. If you wait, you could lose out on doing one at all. Remote or in person. Most colleges are still doing them remote. Makes it easier for us, makes it easier for you. It's COVID safe, all of those things. There may be opportunities to meet one of us when we travel to your high school, to your local area. There might be an alum who's doing it in your local area and wants to meet up in person. I would generally say that this is up to you in the time of COVID. If you feel comfortable doing it in person and you want to take advantage of that, you can. Some schools might not even have the option, and that's totally fine as well. And why should you do an interview? I talked a little bit about this already. We want to learn more about you. We want to give you a voice in your application, even more than you get in your essays. We want to really get to know who you are as an individual, to see where you're going to fit in our college, where you're going to fit in our community, and how you're going to contribute. So I think that's really all the time we have to talk about interviews. So I will pass it on to the next speaker.
Thank you. So yeah, this slide is going to be very broadly about college essays, and then more specifically about personal statements and about supplemental prompts. So I'll explain a little bit about the difference between the two. So your personal statement is going to be a chance for colleges just to get to know you, purely a space for you to talk about yourself, whatever that is. Oftentimes, you will have a prompt, a selection of prompts that you can choose from, and you will be able to write about something that's important to you, like a piece of your identity, an aspect of your personality, a key experience that's happened to you. And it's really a chance for you to leave a lasting impression. So, you can write about anything. You could write about anything from a very key experience you have to what your favorite snack is. It can really be anything. And, it just has to tell us about you. That's your time to let your personality shine through. It is okay if it feels weird at first, just basically talking about yourself for a page, but really getting that practice in is going to be helpful. These essays do not have to be overly formal, but they should be, a level of formal. Make sure you proofread them and whatnot. So that is going to be your personal statement, just to state a place for you to talk about you. The supplemental prompts is going to depend on the college you're applying to. So all of us at the Claremont Colleges and other colleges around the country, around the world, are going to have different supplemental prompts. And this supplemental prompt is going to be you saying why you like that specific college and why you connect with them while you're applying. And this is really important because you're probably applying to a lot of different colleges. Maybe you narrowed down, you want a small college. That's amazing. But if that is your reason in your supplemental prompt, I like blank because it's small. That can apply to a lot of different colleges. So just like it says on the slide, if you could change the name of the college in your supplemental prompt, it might be a little too general. Try diving in. Why do you like that small school? Is it because you can have a tight-knit community? Is it because they have a specific club you like? Is it because you think there's lots of opportunities to work with maybe some specific professors you researched? Just get a little bit more in depth on why you like that specific college. And yeah, tips on how to go about writing this. Maybe you learned about the college. Maybe you're here right now and you're learning about a college, or you tour a college. What stood out to you? What made you say, oh yes, that's definitely somewhere I'm applying. Definitely somewhere I'm interested in getting to know better. So making sure that you're really being specific with those supplemental prompts is important, and that both personal statements and supplemental prompts are an area to talk about you, but just in different ways. One is just about you, and one is about why you connect with the college. But yeah, and the next is going to be letters of recommendation.
Thank you. All right, so as you are looking at the different application components, you're seeing things like essays, short answers, test scores if you choose to submit it, things like your academic profile, so your transcripts. Those are all things that you have a lot of agency over, right? Things like activities as well. And so when it comes to letters of rec, this is sort of the opportunity where someone who knows you, whether that be in or outside the classroom, can speak about you in terms of how you are as a community member, or how you are, as a peer, right? And so as colleges, we're using this letter to just give us that extra insight into how others might describe you, right? And so that might freak a lot of you out, because that means, number one, obviously, you don't know what they're writing about you. And I will say, typically, like 99.9% of the time, teachers are writing great things about you. But also, I think another anxiety point that comes up is, who should I pick, right? Am I choosing teachers who, I have a really good rapport with? Am I just choosing teachers who maybe I scored really well in academically, right? I think a helpful general sort of advice is to definitely choose recommenders who you feel like you have connected with on a more personal level, maybe like in the classroom. These are people who will give us insight into how we think you might be like in our classrooms. And so with that being said, a lot of schools also have specific teachers that they want letters from. So for example, Harvey Mudd wants a letter that is coming from a STEM teacher, for example. Generally, we don't like letters that are coming from teachers that you knew in middle school or elementary school. I've seen elementary school letters of rec, and they are just as you think. They're very weird. But we're trying to get more of a sense of how you are now, right? The person you are, or that you were in ninth grade, is very different from the academic learner that you are, right now as a junior, or entering your senior year. And so, recent is better. And I will say, just as a whole, right, we are definitely aware of the impact that COVID has and still has, on relationship building, especially with teachers right now, right? Maybe you had a year or 2 years, or maybe you still are doing Zoom classes right now, where teachers are strictly just business, right? They're teaching you through the camera, and that's sort of the conversation, right? So, connections are a little bit tougher to be formed. So we definitely understand that. And so just know that, we're human, right? The people on the admission side, we're all human beings. We're just trying to really get a sense of your context and how, others describe you as, in terms of a community member. There's also usual questions about letters of rec coming from counselors. Obviously, not all schools are the same. Some students might have a very good relationship with a counselor. Some might have, might not even know their names, because you're one of, 1,000 students in their caseload. Don't worry too much about that as well. That's obviously things beyond your control that we will never penalize students for. Counselor letters of rec usually just give us more insight into more contextual things that a teacher might not know. So for example, a counselor might let us know that it takes you 2 hours to get to school every day due to transportation issues, right? So again, these are all context that is helpful for us. So do your research on the schools, think about, what the requirements are, and then really think about which teachers you think can speak well on your behalf. So with that, if you have any further questions on the letters of rec, I'm in the Q&A, please chat there, but I'll pass it along to the next component here, which is testing.
Perfect. So for standardized testing, I think the first way to jump into this subject is to talk about different testing policies that schools have. Because of the pandemic, there have been a lot of temporary changes to different schools' testing policies. So what might be true for this upcoming admission cycle might not be true for the next year. So if you are a rising junior or a counselor for multiple school grades, then what's true now might not be true in the next year, in the next few years. So that's definitely something to keep an eye out for every school that you're interested in or looking at. So for these different kinds of policies, there is test-free or test-blind, meaning that test scores are not a part of the decision process when reviewing an application, and students will not be submitting scores to that school. Even if you have taken the SAT or ACT and you want to submit your score, that school will not receive it. Test optional means it is up to you to decide if you would like to submit an SAT or ACT score or AP IB scores. Look into each school into what test optional means. Some schools might be test optional but suggest that you include test scores. Some of them are truly optional and don't mind if you submit them or not. So I would definitely look into each school. It might also be helpful to talk to admissions officer at that school or each school that you're interested in to get their point of view when they're looking at an application. Do they really care that there's a test score there, or does it help a case or hurt a case if it's not there? So definitely take a look at that. And then testing required means that you are required to submit an SAT or ACT score. So you will have to take either test or one of those tests if they specify what they prefer or request. And then you will submit that score regardless of what you've gotten and regardless of whether or not you were excited about that score. But regardless, test scores are just one part of the overall decision that a school will make. So your letters of recommendation, your extracurricular involvement, the writing that you submit, and your transcript will also be valued in this process. So a bad test score or a test score out of range does not automatically disqualify you from every single school that you're interested in. It's a holistic approach, so we're looking at everything. Within the Claremont Colleges, Pitzer is test-free, so you will not be submitting test scores for them. For all the other colleges this year within the consortium, we are all test optional. Some of the schools are permanently test optional. Some of them are based on the needs of each class that is applying. So keep an eye out for each school, but Scripps is permanently test optional. If the other Claremont colleges want to list what they are, feel free to do that. And talking about what tests are optional, we're mostly talking about the ACT and SAT. If you're an international student or need to take an English proficiency exam, that is not included in test optional. So you will still be required to submit one of those English proficiency exams. There's a question in the Q&A about the Duolingo test, and that is continually being a more used exam as it's cheaper and more accessible to applicants. So look into each school if they accept the Duolingo exam and what scores are in range. I'm not sure what our in range scores are for Scripps, but we do accept Duolingo, and I think that's the most popular form of English proficiency exam that we've seen in the past few years. So definitely available for Scripps students. For AP and IB scores, it depends on each school if they include it, if it's required or optional. For a lot of schools, it's used for elective credit or credit that can be transferred over into your school. So taking APs or IBs is still helpful, even if it's not important for the admission cycle. So for Scripps, we do not look at anybody's AP or IB scores. If it's there, we will not include that in our overall evaluation of a student's application. But if you enroll at Scripps, then that credit will transfer over. If you want to see the test ranges that different schools look for or might require, you can look at the common data set. If you look up blank college common data set, that information will come up for you and you can see what range of scores they typically admit. Even if your test score is out of that range, it's usually an average of what admitted students have. So there are people below that average and above that average. So even if you're not right in that sweet spot, there's still a chance that you'll get in for all the other parts of your application that make you stand out for the admissions staff. So don't be discouraged if you're like 20 points off or a little bit out of that scope, you still have a chance of getting in. Let's see, there might be different merit-based scholarships that are tied to test scores. So even if a school is test optional, they might still use test scores to give merit scholarships. So that might be a very important edge in helping you get a scholarship. So definitely talk to different admissions officers, look into their policies, see what they've been doing in past years, and if it's helpful for you to submit an SAT or ACT score, or if it's better to do whatever fits with you. So basically, look into each school. We're all very different and have different policies, but regardless of what you end up submitting within the realm of testing, there's so much aside from testing that's important in your application, as my colleagues have already listed in the slides before and slides after this. So do not be discouraged if that is not the best part of your application. It might not even be factored in it, depending on where you're looking at. So hopefully that'll ease your minds as you consider testing as a part of your application.
Right. So financial aid. So I think this is a really big consideration for a lot of students, as it should be. You can't go to college if you can't pay for college. So paying for college is a really important thing to consider. And the first thing that I will always tell students when you're thinking about financial aid is going to a school's website to use the financial aid calculator. By law, every college in the US is required to have some sort of financial aid calculator on their website. So definitely use that. It's generally called the net price calculator, which you can see at the bottom of this slide. But that's a really good place to start, just to know where you land for any one school that you're seriously considering. So the difference between need-based and merit-based financial aid. So need-based financial aid is based on your income, your cost of living, where it's a lot of tax information, it's a lot of income information, it's a lot of, if you have a business, if you pay child support, like all of these things go into it. So it's based on what your family can afford to pay. So for all of our colleges, we meet 100% of demonstrated financial need, which means that whatever your family cannot afford to pay, we will cover. So for some students, their family can afford to pay half the cost of attendance, and we would cover the other half. For some students, we cover the entire thing. For some students, we only cover $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. It kind of depends. But that is based on your FAFSA and your CSS profile. If you are an international student, you don't fill out the FAFSA, but it is based on these documents. That's how we determine your financial need. And again, net price calculator helps you figure that out. Merit-based scholarships can be based on a variety of other things. For some schools, it can be based on GPA. It can be based on test scores, as Kayla mentioned. At CMC, for example, we look at merit-based scholarships when we're looking at your application, and we do not consider your GPA or test scores in that analysis. It's really about you individually and how your interests, extracurricular activities, essays, and fit into any of our specific merit-based scholarships. But again, every school has a different policy about aid. So when you're starting to do this, some things to think about are gathering your tax returns to make sure that you have them accessible to you. Basically, don't do what I do, just stuff them in a folder every year, and then every year you have to go back and figure out what you did with all of them. So try to keep it organized. And if you're a student watching this, really talk to your parents about how they've been doing their taxes, where those documents are, and making sure that you have them ready. You can also start your scholarship search outside of the scholarships that a school offers. You can look at local scholarships for students studying specific topics or of specific backgrounds, or there are scholarships for people who are left-handed. Like, there's a lot of different kinds of scholarships out there. So we listed some search engines on here that you can use for that. One thing I will note in your understanding of financial aid and how it is incorporated into the admission process, one thing to consider is schools that are need blind versus need aware. Need blind schools don't take your ability to pay into consideration. Need aware schools will take it into consideration, and it can play into your decision. So that's just one thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about this whole process. But there are schools that are need aware and still meet 100% of demonstrated needs. So if you get in, you're still getting all of the money that you would need to pay for that school. So it can be very nuanced. It can be a little bit complicated, but starting with these steps can really set you up for success in the future. So I can't remember if there's one more slide after this.
There is, but that's mine. Thank you, Rochelle. So our last slide before we turn it over to some Q&A, we just want to go over a list of summer resources that we think might be beneficial for you. And obviously this isn't a comprehensive list, but we think it's a good starting point. So the fact that you're all here today attending a virtual session about the college application process is, a great way to begin your journey, whether you're a freshman, sophomore, or junior right now. I think a positive thing, if there was one, that happened during the pandemic was the fact that a lot of colleges had to adapt to their sort of visitor experiences, right? So traditionally students would, go to their campus and do tours and talk to students in person. But now as you're doing your research and going on different college websites, you're seeing all of this sort of virtual offering, right? Where, some schools are even offering open houses, all virtual in terms of, using it in terms of, I guess, they're recording it as well. So you can, watch it on your own time. You can, join these sessions in the comfort of your own home. They're even doing tours virtually. So please start on the college websites because we think it's a great sort of platform for you to start that research. Social media is becoming more and more popular now. YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, I think are the main platforms where colleges are engaging. And most of those are usually run by students. So like current students on our campuses. And so it's a great way to connect and to talk to them and get their sort of experiences. On the right-hand side of this screen, you'll see some resources here that are from entities and companies that we think are great ways for you to start doing some more in-depth look at the numbers. I will say, as you are doing all of these virtual sessions, or if you're even visiting schools this fall, I think it is useful to organize all of your thoughts and to document all of these sort of these information that will be thrown at you. As you learn more about different schools, you'll sort of feel like they all sound very similar in terms of, we're all offering, X class sizes, we're all offering studying abroad and research opportunities. And so I think it's definitely worth it to document all of this and to really figure out where that fits in for your interests, right? Whether or not you like a small school, whether or not you like the location, even the weather, and consider the students that are there, right? So with that, I want to respect our time. We have about 6 more minutes for Q&A, so I will open this up. And we had a couple questions that were marked to be answered live. So I let Peter sort of.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in. Thank you, Stanley. I wanted to jump in a little bit on the questions to point out how cross-registration works a little bit more deeply. There seems to be, it's a common question, like, could I study my primary major at my home school? Let's say it's Scripps. And could I then take a second major at another college? Which college is giving me a degree? Or could I take a minor at another college? Each of us has slightly different policies, but in many cases, and Stanley, you can speak for Pomona, which may be a bit different, but you can do what we call an off-campus major. So that if your own college doesn't offer the major that you can find at another college, your own college may permit that to happen. It's also the case that whether a college offers minors or the way they structure their academic program may be a bit different from place to place. I have not heard about a maximum percentage of courses that a student can take through cross-registration. There are some colleges that have enough choices on their own campus to please the student that certain students from that school might not cross-register as frequently as some others. And that is really a function of the way their academic program is organized. I want to start it with that and see if anybody else has a follow-up response to that. So good. Then a quick thing about safety on campus. Does somebody want to take that on from their own experiences and what they've witnessed? Yeah, Kayla, go ahead.
Yeah, so as a person who lived on campus for a few years, I definitely felt very safe. I often walked alone around all of the campuses pretty late at night, walking from something to somewhere else. So we use our campus security, which is a team of officers that have a home base and a 24-hour open office just in between Scripps, CMC, and Pomona. And then their officers will also go around all of the campuses 24 hours. If a student ever feels unsafe, if they have something they want to report or need transportation from one place to the other, they can call campus security at any time, and then they will arrive to assist them in any way that they can. And then we also use the blue light system. So we have different blue pillars around all of our campuses. If you press that button, that immediately notifies campus security to arrive to that location. So you don't have to worry about the time it takes to call them, wait for them to pick up and explain what's happening. They can get that location and immediately arrive to support you. So again, I felt pretty safe, and you get to know the campus security officers around campus. So they're familiar faces that you see as you walk around all of our campuses.
Super. Another question, we've had a good number of people from countries outside the US. I think that there's some definitions that we need to clarify. If I can take the lead on this, if the question is really about citizenship rather than with the location of your home or the school you attend. So if you are a US citizen or a US permanent resident, you are considered a domestic student regardless of where in the world you're studying or living. If you are not one of those cases, we would look at you, review your application as an international student. Now there's different kinds of pressures from different countries right now. Some places are still locked down. It's varied from location to location in the world, but that is part of what part of our job is to make sure we understand the context of your own living and learning experiences. And if there are things that you cannot control, we can have no way of holding you responsible for things that you can't control. So on the other hand, in maybe a sheltering in place location, you might have some more opportunities to do some things than you might not have done when you're in-person instruction. So I think these are kinds of questions that we want to ask ourselves. I see us now at 4:59. I did not intend to dominate the Q&A section. Is there anything that people want to say aside from reach us individually if you have more questions? Well, with that, our technical genius is going to close down this operation. We have been recording this session. You can contact us to get the information and see the recording again. And to spread it to other people. If you are maybe a parent or a counselor at a school and want to share that with people, that would be just great if you wanted to do that. So with this, I think we need to sign off and wish you the very best, and that we look forward to working with you in the subsequent weeks and months.